The 4th of July BBQ was already sweltering under the Texas sun, but nothing prepared me for the icy disdain I felt when my brother-in-law Richard gestured towards the rickety picnic table by the dusty shed and drawled, "She's fine with the leftovers, ain't she, honey?" He didn't lower his voice, didn't even glance my way. He just handed me a flimsy paper plate, clapped my husband, Mark, on the back, and sauntered back to his gleaming, oversized patio, where the rest of Mark's family was already seated under a fancy awning, sipping expensive craft beer. I stood there for a beat, that cheap plate in my hand, my 2 kids, Emily 11 and Jake 8, shifting uneasily behind me. Neither said a word. They just looked up at me, their eyes wide, waiting for my cue. And me? I couldn't let them see me crumble, not after everything. So, I forced a smile. I led them around the side of the sprawling ranch house to the designated kids and extras area. It smelled of sun-baked dirt and faint oil from the shed. 1 wobbly picnic table, 2 mismatched lawn chairs, and an overturned bucket for Jake. No shade, no festive decorations, just the buzz of cicadas and the distant sound of their laughter. That's where we ate our barbecue. My kids, bless their hearts, didn't complain. They sat, shoulders a little too straight, picking at their hot dogs. Emily pushed her potato salad around her plate. Jake kept kicking at a loose stone, his jaw set. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not anger, not even hurt anymore, just a cold, hard clarity. I looked at them, my fierce protectors, and I knew I was done trying to earn a seat at their table. And then it happened. A gleaming black Range Rover, the kind with tinted windows that screamed money and power, pulled slowly down the long gravel driveway. Not a guest's pickup truck, a serious vehicle. Everyone on the patio paused. I saw their silhouettes through the screened porch, heads turning, drinks momentarily forgotten, but the Range Rover didn't head for the main house. The driver navigated, past the main parking area, and steered directly towards the dusty track leading to the outbuildings, including our shed-side dining spot. The engine, a low purr, cut off, and a woman emerged from the passenger side, tall, impeccably dressed in crisp linen trousers and a silk blouse that looked out of place yet perfectly commanding amidst the rustic setting. She surveyed the property with an air of authority, then her gaze, sharp and intelligent, seemed to lock onto our little group, and when I instinctively stood, brushing crumbs from my sundress, I saw Richard's jaw drop from across the yard. Hadn't wanted to come to Richard and my sister-in-law Susan's annual 4th of July bash. I'd told Mark last year was the absolute last time, but then Emily started asking, will Aunt Susan have her famous 7-layer dip? Will Grandpa Joe remember my name this year? And before I knew it, I was packing a cooler with store-bought cookies and a brave face, trying to pretend this family gathering wouldn't be another exercise in subtle and not-so-subtle humiliation. We live in a small rented bungalow on the outskirts of Austin. It's not fancy, but it's home, clean, cozy, and filled with books and laughter. I work as a part-time librarian at the community library, and I do freelance grant writing for small nonprofits to make ends meet. Mark, bless him, is a high school history teacher, passionate but perpetually underpaid. It doesn't leave much for luxuries. But my kids are happy. They rarely ask for more than we can give. Emily, at 11, is a budding writer, all quiet observation and a sharp wit. Jake, my 8-year-old, is a whirlwind of energy who believes he can fix anything with duct tape and optimism, though I see his confidence falter when he's around his cousins and their expensive toys. On the morning of the 4th, I'd stood in front of our chipped bathroom mirror, wondering if my 10-year-old denim shorts looked too shabby. I told myself it wasn't about impressing them. It was for Mark, for the kids to see their cousins. But a tiny, stubborn part of me still yearned for a flicker of acceptance, of being seen as more than just Mark's less successful wife, Richard. And Susan live in a sprawling, custom-built house on a few acres of what used to be ranch land, now a gentleman's estate. Their place is all polished wood, oversized leather furniture, and the faint, sterile smell of a high-end air freshener. Susan married well, as her mother, my mother-in-law Carol, frequently reminded everyone. Richard is a property developer, brash and self-congratulatory, always boasting about his latest deal or his golf handicap. They have 3 kids, a live-in, nanny, 2 SUVs, and a swimming pool that looks like something out of a resort brochure. Susan and I have never clicked. She was always the golden girl, the popular one, who effortlessly acquired all the trappings of success. I was the quiet, bookish one, the one who married her less ambitious brother, the one they all seemed to subtly pity. When Mark pulled our aging sedan onto their long, paved driveway, carefully avoiding the gleaming luxury cars already parked, the party was in full swing. Music blared from outdoor speakers, and the aroma of expensive barbecue sauce hung heavy in the air. I took a deep breath and turned to the kids. "All right, team? Best behavior?" Jake nodded, clutching a well-loved action figure. Emily just sighed. "Let's just get this over with." We walked towards the patio. No one greeted us at the gate. They never do. It was the familiar drill. Us, a little hesitant, entering the orbit of their boisterous family gathering. My mother-in-law, Carol, barely glanced up from her conversation with a woman dripping in gold jewelry. She was perched on a plush outdoor sofa, fanning herself dramatically. "Oh, Sarah, you made it," she said, her voice carrying a hint of surprise, as if our attendance was always in doubt. "The kids look, well, they're here." Richard swaggered over, a beer in hand. "Hey, Mark, Sarah, kids are getting big, or something." He winked, a gesture that always felt more like a sneer. Susan, flitting between guests in a designer sundress, just waved vaguely in our direction. "Cooler goes over there, Sarah, by the service table," she called out, not even making eye contact. We weren't offered seats on the main patio, nor drinks from the fancy coolers. Mark's cousins chatted easily, their laughter a world away. Emily whispered, "Mom, can I get a lemonade?" She returned moments later, flushed. "Aunt Susan said the good stuff is for main guests. There's tap water by the other table." I knew then, but it was too late to leave. Food was being served, and I hoped for a shared meal. "Just an hour," I muttered. Then Richard clapped, his eyes finding mine with that familiar smirk. "Folks, patio's a bit tight," he boomed. "So, Mark, Sarah, good sports like you are, I set up a spot by the shed for you and the little ones. More room for them, right?" A nervous laugh escaped me. "The shed?" He nodded, dead serious. "Yeah," he then said to Mark, loud enough for many to hear. "She's fine with the leftovers, ain't she, honey?" Every conversation on the patio seemed to stutter and die. No one spoke up. No one met my eyes. And just like that, I was back in that familiar, unwelcome place, shunted aside like a stray dog they hoped would just disappear. My kids looked up at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning hurt, waiting to see how I'd react. So, I smiled. I took the paper plates Richard had gestured towards, and I led them to the shed. The shed-side area was hot, not just from the relentless Texas sun beating down, though that was oppressive enough, baking the dry earth and making the metal shed radiate heat, but emotionally scorching. A place of exile, not of celebration. It smelled of dry grass, old engine oil, and a faint whiff of insecticide. The wobbly picnic table was pushed against the shed wall. 2 mismatched lawn chairs and that overturned bucket. No umbrella for shade. No cheerful red, white, and blue decorations. Just a roll of cheap paper towels and a few plastic forks. An old, deflated pool toy lay forgotten in a dusty corner, a silent testament to other discarded things. Jake slowly climbed onto the bucket. Emily stared at the dusty tabletop, then reached out and tentatively touched my hand. "Are we really eating out here, Mom?" she asked, her voice small. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She didn't say anything else, just sat down on one of the rickety chairs and folded her hands in her lap. Her sundress, one of her favorites, looked out, of place against the grime. I saw her try to smooth a wrinkle, as if it mattered, as if anyone from the main party would even notice. I dished out the food we'd been given from the main buffet by a reluctant-looking teenage cousin, slightly dry burgers, a meager scoop of potato salad, and a couple of lonely-looking corn cobs. No second helpings offered, no choice of sides. No one came to check on us. Jake poked at his burger with a plastic fork for a long time before finally taking a tentative bite. "Why'd they put us out here?" he asked, not looking at me, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't sound like an accusation or an excuse. Emily's eyes were suspiciously bright, but she blinked rapidly, trying to be brave. "Did we do something wrong, Mom?" I swallowed hard. "No, sweetie, you didn't do anything wrong at all. But everyone else is over there," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "And we're here. It doesn't feel like a party." I could barely draw a breath. My chest was constricted with that old, familiar ache, the one born from years of trying to measure up, to be enough for people who had already decided I wasn't. I wanted to march back to that patio, to demand they look at my children's faces, to tell them exactly what their casual cruelty felt like. But instead, I looked at Emily and Jake, at their downcast eyes, and their brave attempts to hide their disappointment, and I felt something even stronger than anger. I felt a profound sense of shame, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had allowed this to happen, year after year, because I had dragged them into this charade, convincing myself that this time, this barbecue, things might be different, that I could show up and be welcomed, respected, seen. I'd spent so much of my life trying not to be a burden, never asking, for too much, always saying thank you, for the smallest, most begrudging kindness. I thought if I just kept quiet, kept smiling, kept enduring, eventually they'd let me in. But I was still by the shed, and it wasn't just about a picnic table. It was about being constantly reminded that you're on the periphery, an inconvenience, someone who doesn't quite belong to the real family. And watching your children absorb that painful lesson, perhaps for the first time with such stark clarity, knowing it would etch itself into their memories. Jake looked at me again, his small jaw tight. "Can we just go home, Mom?" His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even particularly sad. It was flat, resigned, and somehow that pierced me more than any outburst could have. I reached over and squeezed his small, dusty hand. "Soon, buddy. Very soon." We sat there in the oppressive heat, eating slowly, the sounds of their raucous laughter and the clinking of beer bottles drifting over like a cruel taunt. Every so often we'd hear a screen door slam, or the sizzle of more food hitting Richard's industrial-sized grill, but no one ventured our way. No one checked on us. I heard Susan's high-pitched laugh, sharp and bright, as she recounted some anecdote, and my mother-in-law's booming agreement, something about people these days, no mention of us, not even a token inquiry. Emily finally spoke. "I miss our little backyard, even if it's mostly weeds." Jake added, "It's not mostly weeds. It's an adventure zone." And I could have cried right then, with relief and love for these two resilient souls. But I didn't. I smiled at them. A real smile this time, even if it felt like my face might crack. "We'll go home soon," I said. "And when we do, we're making s'mores over our little fire pit, and we'll tell stories, and we'll be thankful for our adventure zone, not for what they think makes a perfect party." They both nodded, a spark returning to their eyes. That's when I truly understood, a realization that should have hit me years ago. This wasn't my family. Blood makes you related. Behavior, love, respect, that makes you family. And my family was sitting right here, under the blazing Texas sun, by a dusty shed. And Sarah's journey, from a dusty shed to a global stage, is a powerful reminder of what can happen when true worth is finally recognized. If her story of resilience and unexpected triumph is inspiring you, and you don't want to miss out on future narratives of incredible women forging their own paths, please take a second to click follow or subscribe and ensure your notification bell is activated. This way you'll always be part of our story-sharing community. And if this particular story, or the work we do here, has struck a special chord with you, and you'd like to show some extra appreciation, there's a great feature right here on YouTube called Thanks or Super Thanks. You'll spot the button just below the video player. It allows you to make a voluntary contribution of any amount you choose. It's a wonderful way to directly support the channel and help us continue bringing you these compelling stories. Plus, your comment gets a special highlight. No pressure at all, of course. It's just there for those who feel moved to give a little extra. Still, as I began to gather our paper plates, preparing to make our escape, I couldn't resist one last glance towards the main house. That's when the Range Rover, which had been parked discreetly near the property entrance, began to move. Slowly, deliberately, it navigated the uneven track, not towards the house, towards us, towards the shed. The Range Rover's door didn't swing open immediately. It unlatched with a soft, expensive-sounding click, as if the occupant inside was in no hurry, already commanding the dusty, sun-baked space. I stood frozen, the crumpled paper plates clutched in my hand. The kids had gone still too. Even they sensed this was out of the ordinary. You don't get high-end British SUVs making a beeline for the shed at a family barbecue. Jake squinted against the sun. "Mom, is that for us?" I didn't answer. The main house had gone strangely quiet, unnaturally quiet. Through the heat haze, I could just make out figures on the patio, now motionless, their attention entirely fixed on the approaching vehicle. I imagined Richard's booming voice cut off mid-sentence. The driver, a woman in a smart, dark pantsuit, emerged first. She was composed, professional. She exchanged a few words with the passenger, then stepped back and opened the rear door with a respectful air. And then she appeared. A woman, perhaps in her late 50s, radiating an aura of quiet, confidence and sharp intelligence. She was dressed in elegant, understated resort wear, a flowing linen dress and expensive-looking sandals that somehow made her look even more powerful in this rustic setting. She didn't even glance towards the main house or the curious onlookers. Her gaze, clear and direct, swept over the shed, the wobbly table, and then settled on me. She took a few deliberate steps forward, the gravel crunching softly under her sandals. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm and cultured, with a faint, unplaceable accent. "I'm looking for the main contact for this property, and for a Sarah Miller, specifically. For a heartbeat, I assumed she meant Susan, Or perhaps Richard in a roundabout way. A business associate? A surprise guest they'd forgotten? But her eyes, piercing and unwavering, were fixed on me. I swallowed, the dust in my throat suddenly thick. "I'm Sarah Miller." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Excellent. You are precisely the person I came all this way to see." The dusty patch by the shed was suddenly charged with an unspoken tension. Jake clutched my hand. Emily stood a little straighter, her eyes wide with a mixture of apprehension and awe. "Do I know you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The woman's smile deepened, a hint of warmth now in her eyes. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I'm the executive director of the Global Children's Literacy Foundation. Several years ago, your community library applied for one of our development grants. The proposal was exceptional, passionate, meticulously researched and filled with innovative ideas for engaging underserved children. It was signed by a Sarah Miller." My mind reeled. I remembered that grant. It had been a long shot, a massive undertaking I'd poured my heart and soul into during late nights after the kids were asleep. Our little library desperately needed the funds. It had been rejected, of course, deemed too ambitious for a small-town library by some faceless committee. "We've been tracking your subsequent smaller grant applications ever since," Ms. Vance continued, her gaze unwavering. "The ones you've written for various local initiatives. Your ability to articulate need and vision is extraordinary." I could only stare, dumbfounded. She went on. "Our foundation is launching a new flagship program, Libraries Without Borders, to establish and support mobile libraries in remote and conflict-affected regions worldwide. We need a visionary program director, someone with passion, grassroots experience, and the ability to inspire. We believe you are that person, Sarah. We'd like to offer you the position. It involves international travel, significant resources, and the chance to make a truly global impact." I didn't answer immediately. The cicadas buzzed, the sun beat down, and the only other sound was the frantic thumping of my own heart. A global impact? Me? Jake finally broke the spell. "Wait, she wants you to build libraries everywhere?" Emily turned to me, her face alight with a fierce, dawning pride. "Because of all those grants you write, Mom, the ones no one else thought would work?" Eleanor Vance looked at my children, a genuine warmth in her smile. "Because your mother has a gift for seeing potential where others see only obstacles. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, standing by that dusty shed, I allowed myself to believe it." I glanced over at the patio. I couldn't make out their individual expressions through the heat haze and the distance, but the stiff, frozen postures of Richard, Susan, and my mother-in-law spoke volumes. They were watching. I could feel their collective gaze, a mixture of disbelief, confusion, and perhaps a dawning, uncomfortable realization. They had relegated me to the fringes, to the leftovers. But now, a powerful woman in an expensive Range Rover had driven past their perfectly manicured lawn, past their ostentatious display of affluence, and sought me out by the shed. I turned back to Ms. Vance. I took a deep breath, the dusty air, suddenly tasting of possibility. "Yes," I said, my voice clearer and stronger than I thought possible. "Yes, I would be incredibly honored." And just like that, the world tilted on its axis. Eleanor Vance extended her hand. "Wonderful. My car is air-conditioned. Perhaps we can discuss the initial details on the way to a more comfortable setting." I nodded, almost dazed. "I'll just grab my purse from our car," I said. "No need," she replied smoothly. "We'll take care of everything, for you, and for your children, of course." Emily grabbed our half-eaten paper plates and held them almost reverently, as if they were suddenly precious artifacts. Jake, his earlier dejection completely gone, slipped his small hand into mine, his eyes shining with an excitement that mirrored my own racing pulse. We followed Eleanor Vance to the Range Rover, the Texas sun suddenly feeling less oppressive, more like a spotlight illuminating a new path. As we climbed into the cool, leather-scented interior, I glanced back at the patio. That's when I got a clearer view of them. Richard stood, his beer bottle clutched in his hand, his mouth agape. Susan's perfectly applied lipstick seemed to be smeared as she whispered furiously to him. My mother-in-law, Carol, was actually fanning herself with a paper napkin, her eyes wide with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Utter bewilderment. They looked like statues, frozen in their disbelief, as if the natural order of their carefully constructed world had just been spectacularly upended. The universe hadn't just flipped the script, it had handed the lead role to the very person they'd tried to write out of the scene. The car door closed with a muted, expensive thud, sealing us into an oasis of calm and quiet luxury. For once, it didn't feel like a world I was looking in on. It felt like a world that was opening up for me. Ms. Vance spoke quietly to her driver, then turned to me with a reassuring smile. "We have a suite reserved at a hotel downtown." I thought, We could have a relaxed conversation there, go over the preliminary offer, and then arrange for you and your children to have a comfortable evening. We can discuss logistics for Mark joining you later, if this is something you wish to pursue." I nodded, still struggling to absorb the enormity of it all. That sounds incredible, Ms. Vance. Thank you." Jake, perched on the edge of his plush seat, whispered, "Mom, are we going to fly on a big airplane now?" I laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh that bubbled up from a place of pure, incredulous joy. "Maybe, sweetie," I said, ruffling his hair. "This is what happens when you believe in big ideas." Emily, ever my thoughtful girl, just watched me, a slow, proud smile spreading across her face. She didn't need to say anything. Her belief in me, reflected in her shining eyes, was the most potent validation of all, as the Range Rover smoothly navigated the gravel drive and turned onto the main road, leaving the sprawling ranch house and its stunned inhabitants behind. I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer asking for a seat at anyone else's table. I was about to design my own, and it would span continents. Dinner that evening in Ms. Vance's hotel suite was a world away from the dusty shed and lukewarm burgers, crystal glasses, real silverware, and a quiet, respectful conversation about literacy rates in sub-Saharan Africa and the logistical challenges of setting up mobile libraries in refugee camps. But the real magic wasn't the gourmet food or the panoramic city views. It was being listened to, truly listened to. Ms. Vance didn't just hear my ideas. She engaged with them, challenged them, expanded on them. She saw not just a small-town librarian, but a strategist, a leader. She asked about Mark, about the kids, about what support we would need as a family to make this leap. There was no condescension, no pity, only a profound respect for my mind and my potential. When I tentatively mentioned my lack of international experience, she simply said, "Passion and intelligence are universal languages, Sarah. The rest, we can teach." The flight to Geneva for my first orientation a few weeks later was surreal. Jake counted clouds, Emily devoured 3 novels, and Mark held my hand, his eyes shining with a pride that made my heart swell. That first year was a whirlwind, setting up pilot programs in rural Kenya, navigating complex bureaucracies in Southeast Asia, seeing the faces of children light up as they held their first ever book. There were challenges, of course, moments of doubt and exhaustion, but every time I felt overwhelmed, I remembered that 4th of July, the sting of Richard's casual cruelty, the hopeful, worried faces of my children, and it fueled me. They hadn't broken me that day. They had, inadvertently, launched me. It's been almost a year since that sweltering Texas barbecue, and in a way, I'm still learning to inhabit the confident, capable woman Eleanor Vance saw in me from the start. The Libraries Without Borders initiative is thriving. We have mobile units in 12 countries now, with more planned. The grant proposals I once wrote in obscurity now shape global policy. Mark and the kids adapted beautifully. He took a sabbatical and is now consulting on educational curriculum for the foundation. Emily writes articles for our newsletter, her youthful perspective invaluable. Jake has become an unofficial mascot, charming local officials and making friends wherever we go. We didn't go to Richard and Susan's 4th of July party this year. We were in a small village in Nepal, celebrating the opening of a new library, the air filled with the scent of incense, the sound of children's laughter, and the rustle of turning pages. I got a short, rather stilted email from Susan a few weeks ago. "Heard you're doing big things. Carol misses the grandkids. Maybe you'll be in Texas sometime." I smiled and archived it. No anger, no bitterness, just a quiet sense of peace. Because I learned something profound by that dusty shed. You can spend your life trying to fit into spaces where you're not valued, or you can build your own vast, limitless space. And when you do, the world, in the most unexpected ways, will often come to you. Being relegated to the leftovers wasn't the insult I thought it was. It was the catalyst I didn't know I needed. If Sarah's story of being overlooked and then spectacularly uplifted resonated with you, if you've ever felt sidelined or underestimated, please know that your value is inherent, whether others see it or not. We all deserve to have our contributions recognized, but if they won't make room for you at their table, find the courage to build a bigger, better one. You might be surprised who shows up to help you set it. If this video connected with you, a like would be amazing. It helps more people discover these stories. Feel free to share it with anyone who might need a dose of inspiration today. And if you're new to our channel, or if Sarah's journey felt real to you, consider subscribing. We're dedicated to telling stories that matter, stories of strength and vindication, and we'd love for you to be a part of our community. Drop a comment below. Have you ever had a shedside table moment that led to an unexpected Range Rover opportunity? I read all your comments and would be thrilled to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and and for being a vital part of something bigger. I'll see you in the next story.